Tere hommikust. Last time in Australia, one journalist asked me the question. They said, do you have any advice to startups, to entrepreneurs, what they should do? And he said, because you've been working a lot with startups. I said, sorry, I have no idea. So I'm going to show you some tools and techniques and also some examples. But it's up to you as an entrepreneur which you like most and what you need to use. I would like to go very fast because I prepared 303 slides in 45 minutes. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay, here we go. So this is me, and I show this picture because I have a twin brother and he's in funeral business. And maybe you confuse him with me because I'm also often dressed in black. But last year, Tobias, my friend and colleague, was actually introducing biz model thinking here at StartSmart. But now I would like to show you the latest insights that we have in biz model thinking and practicing. So we've been running all kinds of training courses, and what is interesting, last night I had a chat with Alex, the author of Biz Model Generation, and we see actually that 3 countries have been really adopting this idea of business model innovation very quickly. And amongst them was Sweden, but also the Netherlands and Estonia. So here up you see that we've been working here also in Estonia on some business modeling and courses. And then we thought, how can we also help startups with the right tools and so on? So here you see that we have a Start in 60-day program in Amsterdam and Bucharest. But you see also now that tools are part of incubator programs, like Startup Bootcamp. And then here you see a couple of companies that actually are struggling with business model innovation themselves. So I would like to show you actually a mix of companies and startups, because I think that corporates should actually change into startups. So what we learned actually is that there are new tools. I will show you some more beyond the business model canvas. But I also show you what kind of new skills you need to have as an entrepreneur. And that also comes down to having actually new mindset, because if you don't have the mindset, then it's very hard to make that work. And that actually means that either if you are a CEO of a startup or a corporate company, you need to actually have these tools, skills, and the right mindset. And not only for yourself, but also for your team. So before we start, actually, if you look at your startup, then what is interesting, the question is, what is actually a startup? And we have been confusing actually this definition of what a startup actually is. So a startup is actually all about searching, because you have no idea whether your organization or your startup, your concept, whether it's profitable, whether you can scale it, and whether you can repeat on running this model. And that's very important to understand, because large companies are actually something else. Because the startup is not just a small version of a large company, because a large company is all about execution. And that's why mostly large companies said, well, we need to work with a business plan. Well, we don't know, because what are we going to write in the plan? The only thing what you're sure of is your own resume, if you haven't been pimping that so much. But all the other information in the business plan you're not sure about. So it's very important to understand what actually is a startup about. So the whole process is about searching and learning. So when you talk about failures, I don't think it's the right word. It's all about learning, because you learn from your mistakes. So I think we need to rethink the way how we do business, because the world is changing so fast. That means that today we see actually forces that we haven't seen before. And what does that mean actually? Because through the power of internet and social media, you can actually start a business with 0 costs. Well, maybe 20 years ago, it was very expensive to start a business because the tools, you didn't have them at hand. But nowadays, you have actually a tech shop in the US, so you can get it here. You can actually print your own tools and stuff, so you don't even need a factory anymore. So when you think of all these things happening, what does it look like if you start up your own company? So when you have this, does it actually help us to design better business? So I would like to see whether that plays out, or how that plays out for your startup or for your corporate company. So if you look at some examples of business model innovation, so you think that you come up with a crazy new idea, and you think it's the best idea ever, so you're very excited, but actually it's not the best idea. And you know why? Because an idea or a business model is only actually on paper. And It's full of wild guesses because you've been designing it together with your friend or on the kitchen table or in school. And actually, this idea has no value at all, actually zero. And why? Because every idea is already invented, only not by you. Because in all different countries, I see ideas popping up everywhere, but a lot of ideas are quite similar. And how come? Because we all have the same personal frustrations, and we have all access to the same information because everybody has access to the internet. So it's very logical that in each and every country, people come up with the same ideas. So how can you actually change that game for yourself? So here you see these guys. The question is for yourself, are you going to then go to market faster? Well, this guy wasn't not really fast to market. Or are you not even start? So I hear a lot of people talking about ideas, but after 5 years, they still haven't made it work because they still talked about it. Or would you like to learn from others? Or do you want to write a business plan? And how are you going to then turn your idea into a viable product? So, and if you have this viable product like this, then how are you able to sell it to customers? So let's go back to your idea. So this is your idea, what you invented with your friend. And you think that there are customers actually who want to buy your product like this, and that they're willing to pay for that. But how can you figure that out? Well, look at the following. Steve Blank from the US, he says actually you need to get out of the building because if you stay in the building, you don't meet your customers. So you need to knock on the customer's door, you need to talk to them, but the thing is, don't do it the easy way. And what I mean with that, because people say like, well, I can hire this agency to do that for me. But what is important actually is that you need to talk to your customers yourself. And why? Because you need to still search for these customers. So others set up like a test panel and say, well, we put them in a room and we're going to test. Well, that doesn't help you either because you don't know what you need to test. You need to do the stuff yourself. So the more you learn, actually, the better you're able to succeed. And why? Because otherwise, you invent something that people are not really caring about, and you invest a lot of money. So let's look at this crazy example. They thought this would be a big success, but actually, this was not really a big success. Then this Apple Newton was also not a big success. And what they have in common actually is that they solve an irrelevant job that actually people are not willing to pay for. So if you look at some startups, then how are startups doing it nowadays? So I was invited at the private school, a Nueva school in Silicon Valley. And what is interesting, this school actually had the question, are we able to teach entrepreneurship? Yes or no? In other words, like, can you learn how to become an entrepreneur? And in this class of 8 to 12 years old, they teach design thinking. So here I introduce you into a classroom where on the left-hand side there was a kid who set up his own company. And he plays the trumpet, and he said, well, the very front of the trumpet, it's too big for my mouth, so it's not very comfortable to play the trumpet. So he said, I want to set up a company that is actually changing that specific product. So what he did, he started to go through the tech shop and 3D printed his own products. And he had a couple of prototypes and he was learning, and then he figured out how to do that. And you know what is interesting? This 10-year-old, what he says, my business is now possible as I can operate in niches with 3D printing. It's unbelievable. So large companies are still figuring out how to apply 3D printing and whether this is whether you're able to set up a business like that. But this 10-year-old already figured that out. If you look at Australia, I would like to meet you Scott. And Scott is a banker, and the weekend he has a hobby to do cage fighting. But in the meantime, he's an entrepreneur as well. And he came up with the idea of OneTab. So he had an idea. He said, well, I would like to make money with an app. So how am I going to do that? Well, he thought he needs to come up with a business model first. But he thought, this is actually an app that can help people drink more easy at the pub. So what you do, you download the app, and then you buy credits, and you go to the pub and you say, well, I already paid for the drinks, but now you can make that work. And he thought, I can make money with the downloads. So if you look at the business model, then here you see at customers, these are the punters, the people who drink. And he said, what my value proposition is about is a really cool app to buy drinks more easily. And he said, on the left-hand side, I need to develop it, and that will cost money. But in the revenue stream, I can make money with downloads. So this was his first idea. But the question was, does this business model really work? And what is actually a pitfall that you as a startup try to build as much as features as possible, because that's cool. But the question we asked him is, what is the single best thing that people are really willing to pay for? So what he wanted to do, he also went out of the building and tested it. So he said, based on what he discovered in the bar, he wanted to redesign his model. So when he was testing his idea in the bar, I think one of the best places to test your ideas, is that actually staff also had a problem with all these credit cards moving around, because sometimes they lose them and they need to activate them again. So they said, well, it's a hassle to work with these credit cards. So actually, through testing this idea, he figured out there was another customer group also actually could be helped with this same app. So here you see the punters, the drinkers, they would like to keep the night moving. They don't want to worry about paying. And the staff, or the pourers, actually, they now have a much faster order process, and they can do more sales. And what is interesting, like the initial idea of making money with just a single download has actually changed into a different business model where he also helps the staff and the pub owners. And now in the revenue stream, you see he is offering that application now for free. And now he's making money on the transaction. So you see that if you test your ideas, then your initial idea, it might be cool on paper, but once you start testing it, you start to shift your business model and change into another business model. And then now you think, okay, wow, cool, this is the model. Well, the question is, what is actually their next business model? Do you have any idea? Very silent. What is interesting is that when I go to the bar tonight at Revel Cafe and I would order with OneTab, then OneTab knows exactly what I order in what point in time. So what is interesting is that the first model, you thought it was about download fees. The second model, it's about transaction fees. But actually the third business model is about data. So now one of the investors is a data mining company, and they take this to the next level. And that's what you see is very important, is first to test your ideas, but also to figure out what are the different options for your company. So it is not about one single business model. It's about exploring the options and try to figure out how these options will play out in time. So let's go to Vienna. I would like to introduce you to Morris and Michael from Vienna. And yes, they look happy. And why they look happy, they used to work for marketing companies, for large companies as marketing guys, but actually they were very tired of their jobs. So they went to a cafe, not to a coffee shop in Amsterdam, but to a Vienna coffee shop. It's more decent. And they said, Michael had an idea, and he said, you know, I want to create a sustainable fashion brand. And I want to build a brand where you can actually get your jeans tailor-made. So he said, he thought it would be very cool, because he said the whole industry is working with the same images. I said, well, what's wrong with this image? But he said, the concept could look something like this. So everybody knows the problem, they can solve it, because off-the-shelf jeans do not fit, because they are too short, you have the ass crack, and you need to try so many pants. So they said, we can make that work. So what he wanted to do is to raise 5 million. And why? Because you need to spend this on marketing and sales, you need to find a cool designer, and you need to do the jeans production, and also find a facility to sell the jeans. So Michael did research, and the numbers looked amazing. So he started to write this business plan, which was very exciting, so you can see. And actually, the bank was willing to give him a loan of 5 million. Well, there will be an angel investor here in the room after me, so let's see what his idea is. But he said, actually, it's crazy because they don't have one single client. So he said, maybe that's not the right idea. So Morris had a different idea, and he said, I would like to do a little bit more hands-on and try something. So he started to think of a business model because he wanted to actually find those customers, and he wanted to understand what are people willing to pay for tailor-made jeans. So very quick question to you guys, like, what are you willing to pay for tailor-made jeans? 169. Awesome. 80. 400? 50? 50? Okay, so I will prove you that you can never figure it out by asking, but you need to do it. So let's see what these guys did. So the reason he said he wanted to try out something himself, because he said, if you write a business plan, you do research for 3 months, you write another 6 months, then you look for money another 6 months, and when you finally start the concept, after 12 months, nobody cares about you anymore because you burned 5 million of cash. So he said, we're going to do that different. So here's how they started. They actually started to go to knitting courses themselves. And these guys had no idea or no experience in the fashion industry at all. So this was their first thing, and the big investment was a button machine, because they said, we need to run a PR campaign. So the big investment was like 200 euros to buy this machine. And then the next thing they said, well, we would like to actually open up a test store for 3 months to see if we are able to learn if we can sell these jeans and if people are interested. So the first thing, they organized this crazy party, and at 2 o'clock at night, the police came because there were 1,500 people showing up, and they needed to stop the party. So Michael and Morris said, this is the best experience ever, because how are you able to get so much free PR? Isn't it cool? So they opened up the test store for 3 months because they wanted to learn the routine for production in 3 months, and they wanted to figure out how much they could sell. So what happened is they could only produce 30 jeans in 3 months, and they sold 500 of them. And you know what is interesting? Nobody really cared that they needed to wait for 3, 4, 5, 6 months for their jeans. And the learning number 1 is actually that they said, well, after these 3 months, we now know who our customers are, what they want, what they don't want, and what they're willing to pay for. 460 euros for a pair of jeans. Crazy, no? And they are profitable, they are successful. So by testing it in the market through this shop, they figured out that there are people who would like to pay 460 euros for a pair of jeans. And they say, well, in 3 months' time, we have a proof of product, a proof of market, and a proof of pricing, resulting in a proof of concept. So this is what it looks like. And learning number 2, they had no idea how to do the production. So normally when people figure out the production first and start to produce and spend a lot of money, they did it the other way around. So they said, we need to learn how to do a new setup, and this is actually what it looks right now. So welcome to the butt lab. That's where they produce their jeans. A butt or pepo lab, depends on how you look at it. And then here is the butt lab, and this is their shop. And what I told you before is that if you are a startup, you need to work and talk to your customers yourself. So with the blue shirt, you see Michael, and here with the red shirt, you see Morris. And in the front of this desk are 2 customers. And the left-hand guy has a company of 60 people, and the right-hand woman actually is his HR employee. And I said to Michael, that's cool, because this guy wanted to buy 60 pairs of jeans for all of their personnel. And Morris said, this is not the case. I said, what do you mean? This guy has an affair with this girl, and he wants to impress her by showing off buying jeans for his personnel. But actually, the only thing what he wants to do is buy jeans for her. So after 3 months, I was back in the butt lab, and the only thing what I was interested in to understand, do they really understand their customers? So I said, Morris, what about these pair of jeans? He said, I told you, we only sold 1 pair of jeans. So what is interesting is that when you do this stuff yourself with your customers, then really the learning starts to happen. So then you choose your denim type, and you decide for your stitching and the logo, and then you measure your butt, and then they start the whole process with stitching and producing. But then after 6 months, they needed to go back to the coffee shop again. Why? Because it took them 8 hours to produce a single jeans, while the industry actually take maybe 11 minutes to do that. So then we needed to redesign the business model again. And then we had very important questions. So what is it actually what you really want? Because you need to go back to your vision as a startup company. And then we've tried to figure that out in the hub in Vienna. And then we remodeled, we changed, and so on. And then this is the result. Clear? So you can recognize the business model canvas, but here in the middle, they say, well, it is not only about cost and revenue, it's also something around social impact that we would like to create. And the other thing what they said, in our channel, actually the whole concept store is very, very important because we would like to give people this experience. So no, we're not going to outsource to other countries. We do production ourselves, and we like to create this experience for people. And the other thing what we figured out is that we could improve the process with shortening the time you spend on production of a single pair of jeans. But then the other ideas came that say, well, we can also produce other goods that are less labor intensive so that they have a higher margin. So these ideas came up, and for them it was enough to work with our designers to actually draw this and not write the whole plan. And so we wrote a visual business plan with them. And back in 2011, they said, well, we have only one pair of jeans, but we know our proof of concept. And profit is 0. But then we would like to move on with a small factory in Vienna and a concept store and add a couple of products. And then there on the right-hand side, they want to create a bigger factory with concept stores in different countries. So what I find interesting is actually with this concept is that in a short period of time, they tried to make that work. They learned a lot about their customers. And these guys were actually, without any knowledge of the fashion industry, were able to create a complete new startup. And when I show this example all over the world, then I saw in Silicon Valley, people said, oh, it's only 460 euros for a pair of jeans. But then in other countries, people say, well, I don't know if this is going to be the right model. But it really depends on your vision as a startup, what you would like to create. Because I met one guy in Australia, a Japanese guy, and he produces tailor-made jeans for only 50 euros. So he is able to do that and to run a successful concept with the same kind of concept, but then with a different price. So you need to ask yourself the question, when you look at these products, is the problem a real problem? And can we identify the need of our customers? And do we identify the target customer who is actually willing to pay for any of these products or ideas that you have? So you have to do this together. So you put this business model together, and you need to talk to customers. So right now our team is working in Turkey for one of our clients to really talk to customers and figure out what they want. And then you need to actually make pivots or changes to your business model. And I can show you some of examples. So what is actually a pivot? Well, your first idea is not the idea how you take that to market. So these guys who have this brilliant idea, they need to pivot their idea as well. So this was a company that we work with, and they said, we have the best bandages for wound care in the whole world. So it is the best tested, and for our general practitioners, it has the highest margin. So they said the selling of this stuff is very easy. So then we asked them, well, go meet these general practitioners in their offices and see what they think of your product. So then they had 20 interviews. And what they noticed is that in most of their offices, there was a closet in the back of the room, and it was supplied with products by a local supplier. And every time when the doctor needed to prescribe some of these products, he took a product out of the closet and prescribed it and gave it to the patient, and the patient left. And what was interesting is that this doctor, he didn't care about the highest margin or the best product. Actually, he couldn't care less. What he cared about is that this patient was helped in a short period of time, because he has 20 to 25 patients that they need to talk to every single day. So if you think that you have the best product out there and that you think quality is the most important, well, start and wait and see if you talk to customers, if that's still the case. So you need to change and pivot your business model, and it might also be that you focus on a specific customer segment, but that might not be the customer segment that actually is the first who starts to buy your product. So this is a technique of one of our startups in the Technical University in Delft. And they said, with this haptics technology, we can actually help parents and children when they are in the hospital and the parents are at home, that they can, through technology, still feel and touch each other. So these guys started to test it. They went out of the building, talked to the CEO of the hospital, and the CEO said, that's a very, very interesting product. And I think there's a huge potential here in the hospital. However, that will maybe take 4 or 5 years. So guys, if you are smart, then you better go to the sex industry, because I think that this goes much faster and there's so much more money to be made.
Yeah, context maintenance. Underpants and bra things, and you can use the app, you get it.
I get it. And what was interesting, so you know what this entrepreneur said? So he turned white and he said, I can't do that. And then the CEO said, why not? He said, well, my mom borrowed me the money to launch this company. And how am I going to tell her that I pivot my business model and need to find, or working with a different customer segment, meaning I go to the sex industry. So beware that you will find other customers once you talk outside of the building. And then you see that sometimes you need to change your technique, and then you see that you can only succeed as a startup or as a corporate startup. Because I believe that when corporate companies start to innovate, actually this innovation project or process is also a small startup. So it is all a very structured process. So if you ask me what you need to do, I have no idea. You could walk around and see what you need to make work. But I told you that I would wanted to say something around the new tools and the new mindsets. So when you look at tools, I think you are familiar with the business model canvas. And the canvas looks something like this. So that's one of the tools. But what we figured out in time also is that the value proposition is very important as well. So it's not only about the product, but you also need to understand who is your customer and actually what is the job you get done for your customers. And that's the idea that Clayton Christensen from Harvard came up with. And then Alex said, well, this is something that we should help people to design as well. Because we need to understand who are our customers and how are we able to build better value propositions. So in the example of the doctor, you saw it had nothing to do with quality. It was not about the product, but it's about the job you get done. Because the job you get done helps as many customers as possible. And you would like to have one closet in a room and it's supplied by somebody else. So on the web you can find Value Proposition Designer, and maybe already some of you use it. The other thing what we figured out is that people say, well, where's competition in the business model canvas? Well, the business model canvas is not the tool that solves all your problems. So we thought we can also see a different map where you can discuss what your market looks like. Because it's the same with the business model canvas. You put your post-it notes up there, and what you would like to have with your team, either whether you're a startup or a large company, you would like to have a strategic conversation around your market. So it's not about that I do research as a company for one of my clients and tell them what the market looks like. You as a team need to understand, okay, so our company is here in the middle, what do we see happening around us? And what is interesting now with one of our clients, you see in each and every country it's completely different. So you can't say from a headquarters, this is the concept, and in each and every country you're going to implement it like this. So we saw that the context analysis, or maybe you could call it the context canvas, is an interesting tool. And then we have one more, is I believe, having seen more than 250 startups in the last few years is vision is actually more important than your business model. So the power of vision, the question we then ask to startups, so what is it you would like to achieve? What are your goals? And then they say, well, I don't know. So when I started Business Models Inc., my wife also said, what is your vision with this company? Well, I had no idea. And why? Because we don't have the tools actually to facilitate that discussion or to figure that out. So one of the tools we use, is pretty fun, is that, okay, so imagine yourself that you are featured in 3 years from now, and you have a big success, and the Financial Times is actually reporting an article about you. Then what is the interview about? And what moments did you go through? But for startups, very important, like what are the financials? Because here you get an idea whether you talk about employing yourself or setting up a medium-sized company, or what you see mostly in Silicon Valley, scale a huge company. And when we did this 2 weeks ago in Amsterdam at the hub, then there was one couple who was working on a startup concept. So the wife worked on this idea, and the man did also the same. And then the man presented his idea, and he said, wow, this is so cool, and this is my passion. The interview is about that we made it work, we are a global company. And then the wife afterwards did the same presentation, but she said, this is such a cool concept, I believe in my husband, and in 3 years' time, we're going to sell the company. They're not together anymore, because she wanted to sell it, and he had a different idea to grow a global company. So I find it fascinating to see what kind of tools you can use in strategy. So it's about the business model canvas, it's around understanding your market, understanding your customers, and know how to design a value proposition, but then also understand your vision. So enough about tools, now look into skills. I think we actually should ask designers more and more to come to sit at the table. And why? Because I think we should ourselves think more as designers. So there are a couple of techniques here. One is observe. So wherever you look, that's what you see. So if you don't go out there and look and observe, then it's very hard to come up with an idea. So I get often the remark that they say, well, Steve Jobs never came up with the iPad concept, and ask people, well, is this something you want? No, but what he did, and what his team does, is they observe and look around and understand, okay, so what are real interesting behaviors that we can build something around. So this was what OneTab also did in the bar. So observe is a very important skill. The other thing is think visually, and I believe that drawing is the new writing. And why? Because if you start to write, it takes too much time, nobody's interested in reading. And when you draw, it actually helps you to see more. So eyes, pencils, and the hand may be the tools of the past, but I believe that are the tools of the future. That's what John says. And throughout our classes, we actually help people to draw and to write. So there was one book, it's called Visual Meetings from David Sibit, and we translated that into Dutch, and it's all about how you can do this kind of stuff. So I sent this copy to my dad, and my dad called me 1 week later and said, Patrick, are you serious? Are you teaching companies how to draw? Or is this a joke? But I think that, yes, we are into the digital age with tablets and so on, but actually drawing and visual thinking helps you to get the results much better and faster. So here you see an example how we were visualizing one of the business models of Spotify. And you see that it goes faster to have a clear understanding what the concept is about. Number 3 is ideation. When I ask how you do brainstorming for business model ideas, you can do brainstorming, but if you don't use techniques, it's very hard to come up with the right ideas. So when you use the business model canvas, you can actually start thinking from resources. So if you think of my twin brother's company, the funeral home, well, think from resources. He could also maybe organize different parties, because maybe that's his core skill, and organize wedding parties to newlyweds, and then have a complete different revenue stream. So you can use the canvas to start brainstorming and innovate new concepts. Or you could say, let's understand customers better. How can we come up with new ideas? Or what we did with one of the biggest car manufacturers. We said, well, how can you innovate a concept when you only start to think of working with partners? So that means that if you look at these kind of concepts, it's not very clear what would be the real business model. Is it selling the product, or is it something else? So when it comes to skills, you need to be able to juggle with business models, and you need to be creative as a CEO of a startup or a large company. And the other one is prototyping. So we get often the question, what is the single right model for this concept? Well, there is no such thing. You saw that with OneTab. Actually, they are now working on the third business model in a row. So what you need to do is to generate options, the same as architects do. So Frank Gehry, who designed the museum in Bilbao, the Getty Museum, he said, what is important is I need to sketch because I need to test different ideas. And sometimes I show people a Shrek model, like this green monster. He said, because when I show this Shrek model, I get very crazy feedback and different ideas. He said, and that's what I like. I like to shock people. So here you see some of their sketches. And when we published the book ourselves, we also came up with 8 business model prototypes for publishing a book. So we thought it can go through the publisher model, the ebook, free for marketing, on demand, do it yourself, the sponsored book, or a customized book. And I said to Alex, I'm going to make sure that we get a sponsored book, so that's not an issue. But after 5 meetings, nobody was interested in sponsoring the book. And if I thought that that was the single solution to sponsor the book or to publish the book through sponsoring, then the book would never ever have happened. And now we already sold almost 1 million copies. So interesting is that this model didn't work at the start. We learned from creating all these other models, and after 2 years we thought, okay, now it's enough, we give it over to the publisher. So prototyping and understanding that there's no single solution is something that designers already do for many years, and I think that's a skill that CEOs should learn as well. And then the last one is see the future. That's something that, when it comes to scenario planning, Shell has been doing for many, many years. But what is interesting, actually, there's only one way to live in the world of speed, meaning to visit the future frequently. Because people say, like, well, you see so many business model concepts and you come up with these ideas. But I think that has to do with the fact that if you visit the future frequently, actually you see more. So this was a workshop that I did together with my colleague Lisa in Silicon Valley. And then we thought, what would it look like if you create 4 different scenarios and then put the business models in each of these scenarios? And then, no, these are not real-time solutions for a concept, but what you see, what you learn, is actually amazing. So the question, what does that mean if you look at tools and if you look at skills? What does that mean for the CEO? Well, I think that he needs to think and act like the designer as well. And he needs to go back to school, but not to Harvard or to Stanford, but he needs to go to the College of the Arts. And why? This is the College of the Arts in San Francisco, and what they teach here is actually design MBA. So it's not about the traditional MBA anymore, but how can you add design thinking to a traditional MBA? And what they do at the design MBA, where Lisa is teaching, actually, I was in that classroom, and you see that they prepare a new generation of leaders that actually is not only about profits anymore for business. So it's also about sustainable, ethical, and truly meaningful companies. So I believe that then you as a CEO need to become some kind of maybe Superman who needs to be able to save the world with new business models. And the question is, to you, is what is next for you? I still love to work with all kinds of startups because I think this will generate more ideas. I see now even that it helps governments to actually be more flexible and more innovative. So we run a workshop in Australia where startups were invited to come up with new business models around public transport data. And I think it's fascinating to see what you can create with just single startups. And we see also that actually that these corporate companies, they want to become startups, so they ask us for programs how to do that. And the question for me to you is, what is it that you're going to do next? Thank you.
So you all can think of good questions. I will start with mine, which business model canvas. Sorry, switch it on. All right. In business model canvas, what you showed and which I hope most are familiar with, there is actually no place where to write a problem. Although you said that the problem, understanding the problem of a customer is the most important thing where you should start. So where should I write a problem if I use a business model canvas?
Well, I think that this canvas has 9 building blocks. And when you look at how Alex put that together, it's based on his PhD thesis and a kind of ontology. And he said, well, the problem is outside the canvas. Mm-hmm. And the canvas is just a checklist to see how these different questions need to be answered and how they all play and are in balance. So I know that there are also people who tweak the canvas and put problems in there. But I think the way it is set up right now, that can help you with understanding the business model canvas, because otherwise this model would be too complicated. And I think one of the key things why this business model canvas is used so widely is just the very simple presentation and very easy use.
Mm-hmm. One thing you mentioned also was about in the situations where you have to generate ideas and making, with a Shrek example, that giving a different context, it helps to generate more wild ideas. In Idea Lab, we use Idea game, board game, which is fully based on generating different ideas and concepts. That you have pictures of a cow, of a Schumacher, of Bin Laden, and these trigger different ideas. What we have seen is that people usually don't stick with great and brilliant ideas. That even though they come up with them, they still go to usual, boring, common things. How's your experience that with a business model canvas, you also enforce people to think kind of out of the box? But do you also see that we still have a tendency to go back to the box, even if we have been out there?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things to that. I think when you look at innovation techniques, more than 50% of our ideas, whether with startups or with corporate companies, actually come from learning and understanding other business models. So in Taiwan, they call it stealing, and here we call it learning. But this is a huge inspiration source of new ideas. And the other thing, what I like what you do in the Idea Lab is very important, that you need to actually stretch your ideas. So for example, if you look at the left-hand side of your company, your concept, it's all about the improvement of your business model. But you need to really stretch ideas and do crazy stuff in order to come up with these out-of-the-box ideas. Because when we worked for the large car manufacturer, they had a website internally and they shared ideas, but these were all small ideas. And you need techniques, either the techniques that you describe, in order to really come up with bold and crazy ideas. But then you need to explain them. It's not about that solution, but when you explore all these options, then you come back with better ideas yourself. And actually then you see that you can improve your model. Because what we saw yesterday, we were working with Enterprise Estonia and with BDA, where we had companies coming up with business model innovation themselves that did presentations. And you saw that they were exploring crazy ideas, but when it comes to implement and improve, they actually stick very close to the core business. And actually that makes sense, because you're not able to do some disruptive new crazy thing when it comes to resources that you have.
Any questions from the audience? Yes, can we have Mike here? Yes.
Hello, I'm Margus Pala from GoWorkabit. Can we start only with talking with customers and without building the product? And if yes, then when is the best time to start actually building the product when we know the market?
So your question is that you can already start, that you can only start with talking to customers?
Only if you have a product, but it's difficult to talk to a customer if you just have a vision. And if you get the feedback from a customer, how much feedback you need before you actually build something?
Yeah, so on the one hand, I think there's no right or wrong. So if you have a product, you don't necessarily need to talk to customers, but actually the risk is lower that you come up with something that actually customers are willing to pay for, and that you can change and improve your idea. That's the one hand. And the other hand, like right now we are testing in Turkey together with plumbers to figure out if the product is the right product and how many times you need to test it. Normally people would like to get the numbers, but I think a venture capitalist would say, well, if you have a customer that's willing to pay for, that's already a very good start. So it's very hard to come up with like what are the right numbers to test it. So there's no clear rule for that, in my opinion.
Any more questions? Yes, we have a.
Do you use your own models to improve your own business, like rethinking right now and so on?
Yeah, so in my company, in Bismos Inc., actually we don't use hourly rates for consulting. And we say, okay, it's a fixed price, it's a fixed format, but we try to learn every single time. So I explored also an online model. So we designed an online training course, but we understood it's a completely different ballgame and we're not used to do these kind of things. So our online model is, we're not going to do that. But the other thing, what is interesting is we tested actually a new format idea with Enterprise Estonia yesterday, where we thought, what would actually happen if multiple teams from companies come together in 2-day workshops and we do innovation all together? Because we thought it would be fun actually to learn from all different companies. So yeah, we are testing all the time and we try to improve and try to figure out new ideas. But the revenue model, how we work with fixed fees and fixed pricing, that's something that we really stick to. So that one hasn't changed for 5 years.
Do you see it as a problem?
No. I think it works very well, and the reason why is we've seen actually a lot of patterns coming up when you look at business models. So it's not about, for example, ownership anymore, but it's about access. So with Spotify, you see you don't need to own music, but you can get access. BMW, they offer cars in San Francisco, you don't need to own them, but you have access. And we thought, how can you actually turn a service into a product? So when you see it as a product, it's much easier to explain what it is, what is the price, and what you deliver. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I'm very happy with this model because it gives so much more clarity.
There's one kind of critique on this pivoting. People say that startups don't stick to their vision anymore. That they do one test, they talk to 20 people, they don't like it, and they decide, okay, there's no market. I talked to 20 people, there's no market. And they take a next idea they have. So they just go to the first stumbling block, and then they decide that we have to pivot. So what's your experience in this? Is it really a problem that startups pivot too fast and too many times?
Yeah, so if you ask investors in Silicon Valley, they say so. They say, well, at some point you just need to go and not test it when the idea is already too early, because otherwise you kill the idea. So you should be careful at what time you exactly do that. And of course, it's the same when you introduce your concept or idea. So yeah, agree. There was one in our startup classes, there was one lady who actually made beautiful classic hats. And after 2 days in the workshop, she said, okay, I figured out there's no business. It's old-fashioned stuff. And I think she was right. So that makes sense. So she stopped doing that business.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, ask to a mic.
Hi, Marko Karu. How do you actually give that feedback if a company has a let's say outdated product or something that doesn't make sense? How do you tell them, or how do you make them realize that that product doesn't fly?
Well, one thing is, I'm not the one who can actually predict the future, so that one is pretty hard. But the other thing you see that some companies still rely on the same things that have been doing on and on and on. So there's one interesting case study from the book Sizing the White Space. It's about Hilti. And I see this example coming back in manufacturing a lot. So the example is that the power tools are produced at a much lower price in other countries. And normally what you see companies are doing is actually also to go that same route, to start producing cheaper and so on. But what Hilti did, they started to figure out, well, who is actually our customer and how can we help them in a better way? So they started to come up with fleet management, where the job is not the tool, but actually managing the tools. And now I see we work with another manufacturing company, they are doing the same thing. So they think, wow, the others are cheaper, and we need to come up with a cheaper solution. So it is interesting. I think it's very hard to say, okay, so this is not gonna work, this is not gonna fly. But you see that companies need to change the things that they've been doing before. And the most important thing to figure that out is to see whether these assumptions, what they have, whether these are opinions, or whether this is really tested with customers. So for example, this manufacturing company, they say, well, we have the best quality products, again. And then when they tested it this week in Turkey with the plumbers, they say, well, we don't care about quality. We just would like to have these tubes, and if they're there, that's fine. It doesn't make sense what brand or what quality it is. So it's about figuring out the assumptions and talk to your customers.
Any more questions? No? Then thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I have, as we are living in a cold country, and it's getting, despite the fact that it's very warm start of a winter, last was like 10 years ago. So there's some healthy products to keep you healthy. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I thought it's a cold country, and then you come up with another product, but I'm very happy with this present. Thank you.